Dark has been one of the strongest Pokemon types ever since its introduction in Generation 2, and it has only gotten better over time. Dark type was created as a response to how powerful Psychic types were in Gen 1. A complete immunity to Psychic is among the greatest advantages to being a Dark type. Dark types have also always been known as a foil to Ghosts, with their super effective damage against them and access to the move Pursuit. Ever since Knockoff received its enormous buff in Generation 6, Dark types became even more prevalent and commonplace in competitive. Some types, like the Ice type, are known for being excellent offensively, but horrible defensively. And for that reason, most successful competitive Ice types are the same kind of Pokemon. Fast, but frail offensive threats that can take advantage of that great stab damage. But Dark types are blessed with the privilege of being great offensively and defensively. So there are a variety of different kinds of Dark types that can thrive in competitive, from glass cannon offensive powerhouses, to bulky offensive wall breakers, to purely defensive walls. Let's explore the history of one of Pokemon's most consistently powerful types throughout the generations. But first, an update. In the recent horse mania brought upon by newly anointed horse Rhydon, the Dark type Pokemon Crocodile has stepped up to let the world know that he too can learn the move High Horsepower, and may also be a horse. However, a recent law was passed denying any claim to horsehood based purely on access to the move High Horsepower. Crocodile is merely trying to improve his social mobility with this horse claim. Subscribe to the channel so that we can be prepared for any other legal loopholes that this creative crocodile might employ. Thank you. Gen 2 introduced the Dark type, and perhaps the most iconic Dark type of all would be Umbreon, at least as far as mono Dark types go. And Umbreon was very solid in its debut generation. Umbreon has great defensive stats, fantastic bulk, and Dark is a pretty nice and simple defensive typing in Gen 2. It's weak to Fighting and Bug, which aren't too prominent. You're going to see Machamp occasionally, Dynamic Punch for coverage, and the occasional Heracross with Megahorn, but other than that, you're really good neutrally into just about everything. I guess your resistances and immunities don't come up too often, to be honest. You're immune to Psychic, but there aren't that many Psychic type attackers here. Maybe the occasional Exeggutor with Stab Psychic or something. But yeah, it's just a nice solid neutral defensive type. And this set is nice because it offers Pursuit with Stab, which helps you eliminate Gengar, which can be useful to enable your teammates to more safely explode and rapid spin. And it's just an all-purpose wall against anything that is really hard to break. With Rest, you can shrug off status. And Charm has 32 PP and lowers the target's attack by 2, so you can even get rid of a Snorlax's Curse boosts or other boost sweepers and just neutralize them. Pretty useful. It's a very slow way to play, I will say. Kind of an indestructible wall that just sits there. But it's good. It's OU ranked. You commonly see it in tournaments. Umbreon also had some game-breaking potential in the past, and new rules had to be added to stop this from happening. This set right here with Mean Look and Baton Pass. When you Mean Look a Pokemon, they can't switch out anymore, so they're trapped with. And Umbreon could just spam Sand Attack or even Charm until their stats are absurdly low and they have no accuracy, no attack. And then you can Baton Pass, and when you Baton Pass an enemy that is Mean Looked, they stay trapped against whatever you switch in. So you can just have this infinite chain of this poor Pokemon who's debuffed to the most possible extent it can be, and then you just go to like Growth Jolteon or something, boost all the way back up to max, and sweep everything. It was really broken, so Mean Look and Baton Pass as a combo are banned, as are any trapping moves and that, because you could just chain infinitely forever, and like some poor Exeggutor is just sitting there getting sand attacked 32 times. Tyranitar was introduced in Generation 2, the king of competitive Pokemon, with a fantastic debut in OU. And I've talked about this guy a lot in my rock type video, and of course, just in general, it comes up often. A prevalent Pokemon throughout many generations. But let's talk about the Dark type side of Tyranitar here. Like I said before with Umbreon, the Dark typing doesn't come up too often for Tyranitar in Gen 2. There's not that many Psychic type attackers. And the one that does exist is Exeggutor, who has Grass Stab to hit Tyranitar anyway. I believe even Alakazam in Gen 2 runs Dynamic Punch for coverage to hit Dark types, so that's something to consider too. Ghost resistance never comes up here. There's no Ghost type attacks to speak of. Gengar is using all special attacks. Miss Drevis is not using Ghost Stab, so that's not useful yet. The Dark typing is pretty much there to put Stab on Pursuit, interestingly. It doesn't really provide much defensive benefit, at least not yet, but Stab on Pursuit is a really good thing to have, and that's the main reason the Tyranitar is used. Not only for Pursuit and its solid special attack stat, but its wide coverage in general. Unlike Umbreon, Tyranitar actually hits pretty hard and represents a bit more of an offensive threat, more of an aggressive pursuit user. Does more usually, more popular than Umbreon as a pursuit user. Roar is nice utility, Fire Blast is great coverage against like Forretress, Skarmory, Steelix, common steel types. It even hits Exeggutor, which you do want to hit. And Rock Slide hits Zapdos. It's interesting. In this generation, the Dark type isn't providing much for Tyranitar. In fact, it's a little bit of a downside because it's a ×4 fighting weakness, which can be exploited by Machamp in particular. The main benefit you're getting from it is Stab on Pursuit, which you do want. But later in the franchise, the Dark typing would have more defensive value. And Houndoom is another Dark type you might see in Gen 2 OU. It's pretty viable. Another Pursuit user, but Houndoom has the highest special attack of any Pursuit user. It's fast, and it also has Fire Stab, which is really good. Switches straight into Exeggutor with no problem, because you're immune to Psychic and you resist Grass. Pretty much all its coverage it could have. Access to Roar is pretty nice. I think that Tyranitar is still more popular because Tyranitar has mixed coverage. Houndoom can be pretty easily walled by like Snorlax, who is literally the most common Pokemon. The occasional Blissey will just completely wall you. Even water types, any water type like Suicune, you at least hit Starmie with Crunch, which is nice, but if they get in, they can force you out with Surf. So Houndoom is not a great fit, but can be okay. Something else you can do with Houndoom is use a Sunny Day set to do huge damage with Fire Blast. Some people even go Charcoal on this for even more damage. As a bit of a wall breaker, you go Sunny Day Fire Blast, and that can actually do serious damage to Snorlax. So a Pursuit user that has a little bit more offensive firepower, literally, if you go with this kind of set. In Gen 3, Tyranitar is the only OU ranked Dark type. And from here on you would start to see a little bit of a pattern where Tyranitar kind of takes all the spotlight away from other Dark types because it is just that good. It is the best Pokemon in the game in Gen 3, and if you already have a Tyranitar on your team, feels like diminishing returns to put even more Dark types on that are aiming to do a similar job that Tyranitar can just do already. There are some cases of using multiple Dark types on a team, and some other Dark types are viable for their unique value. Tyranitar definitely steals the show in a big way. All that it provides, creating Sandstorm on the field, punishing all leftovers users, and just its incredible set variety, the amount of roll compression you can fit on it, how threatening it is with sets like Dragon Dance. And the Dark typing in Gen 3 feels significantly better defensively this time around. Because in Gen 3 there are a lot of really powerful Psychic types. It's not that Psychic is a fantastic type in Gen 3, it's just that a lot of great Pokemon happen to be Psychic types and use that Psychic stab a lot. And Tyranitar kind of puts a stop to that with its immunity to Psychic, which really comes in handy against enemies like Celebi, Jirachi, Starmie, Claydol. Now, a lot of those Pokemon can threaten Tyranitar too, like Celebi has Grass Stab. Giga Drain will do quite a bit of damage to Tyranitar, but Tyranitar can often threaten Celebi back. Pivot in on that Psychic and then threaten a Stab or Crunch if it's the Pursuit set, or an Hidden Power Bug if it's a physical set. Same deal with Claydol, they're all weak to Dark, so they don't love hitting Tyranitar, who is usually quite bulky, and then taking a big crunch in response, which usually really hurts. Especially Starmie just gets one hit by that if they're an offensive set. And Pursuit Tyranitar, a very Dark type oriented set, is one of the most popular ways to use Tyranitar at the high level. This is a fantastic way to eliminate Gengar, which feels even more important in this generation than it did last generation, because spikes are such a central mechanic, and being able to rapid spin safely is so important to give your team that breathing room and get rid of spikes from the field, which are dealing significant damage to you every time you switch in. Houndoom is ranked UUBL in Gen 3, but this is a great Pokemon actually. Seen pretty often in high-level play. Offers a lot that Tyranitar can't as a Pursuit user. Most notably, the Dark typing feels really nice on this because of just how good this Pokemon is into Jirachi and Celebi. Psychic immunity and Grass resistance really come in handy, and you're able to threaten both of them significantly. So the ability to not only have a way to trap and eliminate Gengar, but also to improve your matchup against fire types, thanks to Flash Fire, a new ability for Houndoom. And also improve your matchup into Jirachi and Celebi, because they both hate getting hit by Crunch or Fire Blast, is really good. And Houndoom has a lot of moveset variety too, actually. You can run Will-O-Wisp on it, which is a pretty scarce option. One of the best moves in the game. Anything that has this is loving life, to be honest. Really safe move to just click and get some progress. Another way you can go with Houndoom is Beat Up. which can 2-hit KO Blissey specifically if your whole team is healthy and non-statist. It's a weird move in Gen 3. It's not actually a dark type move, it's typeless, and it deals damage based on base stats, not EVs or natures, so hits Blissey really hard because Blissey has like 10 base defense. It's sometimes used on Charizard or Dugtrio specifically to target Blissey, and Houndoom can do the same thing, luring in Blissey because it's special attacker, hitting them with the surprise physical damage that just destroys Blissey. And you can go Roar on this, which is nice, using it in a similar way to like a Moltres or something, punishing incoming Blissey in that way. As they step on spikes, you force them out again. And just in general, quite useful to have Roar against, I don't know, a Ninjask or some boost passing strategy of some kind, like a Calm Mind Celebi or Agility Pass Zapdos or something like that. Or a Sleeping Suicune with Calm Mind and no Sleep Talk. HP Grass is also good coverage you can run. HP Ice. I mean, yeah, Houndoom is an awesome Pokemon. Really fun to use, enables some interesting teams. Works well with Porygon 2 to patch up the Dugtrio weakness. One vulnerability to Houndoom is that poor Dugtrio matchup, you get trapped and eliminated by Earthquake, but Porygon 2 helps out in that department, so they're a common combo. Umbreon is interesting in Gen 3. It doesn't see much success at a high level. You see it very occasionally. And the thing is, it seems really good. I've always thought Umbreon had potential. Like, the stats are fantastic. It's got Synchronize, which actually works really well into Gengar. You come in a Will-O-Wisp and just destroy them. And as a special wall, it functions pretty nicely against common attackers like Zapdos and Starmie, because just have such good special defense. You're even immune to Psychic against Starmie if they happen to be running that. Dark type helps against Celebi, Claydol, things like that. So it looks really good. And it even has Wish support now. Didn't have this last generation. Wish support can really help out bulky teammates like Hariyama or even Forretress, who can't heal for themselves, but they want, you know, to heal up anyway. I think that the biggest issue with Umbreon is that it just doesn't do enough with Pursuit to Gengar. Actually, it can struggle sometimes to even 2-hit KO it. You gotta invest in a lot of special attack to be able to 2-hit KO it on the way out with Pursuit, and then that's just a lot of EVs that you're spending on special attack for that one purpose, and it feels like a bit of a waste. You can't really use your great defensive stats that well. So to get rid of Gengar, you kind of rely on that Wisp Synchronize. If you can sync Wisp against them and they get burned, that's huge, because Gengar's chipping away over time, taking pursuits. But that's not always what happens. Maybe they miss Wisp, or they don't have Wisp. Some Gengars drop Wisp for like more coverage or Explosion or something. So feels flimsy, whereas Tyranitar Pursuit pretty much always gets Gengar unless they have like Hypnosis Focus Punch or something crazy. Even Houndoom feels better at eliminating Gengar because it just has really high special attack, and it can also do more in other matchups, like helping you versus fires. Umbreon, if it was a bit better at getting rid of Gengar, like it had 80 special attack or something, it would probably be a pretty common Pokemon, but that's just the biggest downfall of it. And the thing is, you kind of want to run Umbreon without Sand, because that might be the other benefit to it. Tyranitar, as a Pursuit user, sets Sand, which not every team wants. Some teams with Snorlax, Suicune, Blissey, Pokemon like that, don't like Sand. They prefer to have the leftovers heal. But without Sand, you really struggle to actually get rid of Gengar too, because Gengar being able to chip heal allows it to rack up a lot of health over time if you're not setting Sand. So ironically, I think the best Umbreon teams also have a Tyranitar. That's an instance where you can run 2 dark types and it's alright. Because at least Umbreon frees up Tyranitar from having to be Pursuit Tyranitar. You can run a physical Tyranitar alongside Umbreon. Then you have the Sand, and you're a bit better at eliminating Gengar like that. A team by River that I quite like uses that combo of Umbreon and a Choice Band Tyranitar, which makes some sense, but that's a pretty rare instance of Umbreon being useful, where it enables Tyranitar to not be physical. Most of the time it's just easier to make Tyranitar Pursuit, but yeah, that's my little Umbreon rant, folks, forgive me. A bit off the rails from Jim, my apologies. I've experimented with this Pokemon a lot, that's why I have all these thoughts. I've tried it, and it seems good, but it just has these little weird shortcomings that you wouldn't necessarily think at first glance. And Sableye deserves a shout out, folks. Was famously used by ABR, legendary Pokemon player, as a spin blocker on one of his teams, a very defensively oriented team. And Sableye has some little advantages over other spin blockers in the format, one of them being its dark typing. Dark Ghost is an amazing type combination with no weaknesses in Gen 3. The problem though is that Sableye has, you know, no stats to speak of whatsoever, 50 base HP, I mean, come on. But the typing and this move pool is pretty great. Recover, no other ghost type gets Recover. Knockoff is amazing. Almost nothing gets this. Hariyama is the best Pokemon with Knockoff on it. Armaldo occasionally uses it, but to have it on a healing spin blocker like this is really nice. And the rest are just filler, honestly. Like, these two moves are the big things. Seismic Toss is just to be able to click something, do some damage. And Psych Up can be useful sometimes against Snorlax. You copy their curse boosts if they're Curse Snorlax. And then you have defense now, so they can't do much damage to you with Shadow Ball or Earthquake. Dark typing is really nice on a spin blocker because it offers Psychic immunity, which is fantastic against Claydol, the most common rapid spinner in the game, who always runs Psychic to hit Gengar super effectively. Gengar is the most common ghost type you want to hit, but Sableye is immune to Psychic instead. That's huge. So we can actually pivot in on Claydol, not only blocking Rapid Spin, but blocking Psychic. And then we knock off Claydol, that's huge. Without leftovers, Claydol loses its form of healing, and is going to really deteriorate over time. So Sableye is a lot better than it looks. Still not great, and can be vulnerable to just random stray hits. It just has no bulk. Gets really worn down by just any random hit. But yeah, one of the coolest low-tier choices by a top player in recent memory, in my opinion, was the Sableye by ABR, which he brought against M-Dragon, I think in Kalos Invitational, and it won. I'm not sure if it was M-Dragon or someone else, but that was crazy to see Sableye win a high-level tournament game. In Gen 4, we have our first Ubers level Dark type in the form of Darkrai, another mono Dark type. This one, a really speedy special attacker, with a really powerful signature move and a signature ability combo. Dark Void has an 80% accuracy and puts the foe to sleep, and Darkrai's ability, Bad Dreams, causes sleeping enemies to lose 1/8 of their health at the end of each turn. So you're doing like the same chip damage as Burn would do by putting them to sleep. Pretty significant when sleep is already so powerful, and this is a really accurate sleep move for something so far. So this was huge in Ubers, and it's really common. And a lot of the anti-lead metagame in Gen 4 Ubers is actually built around stopping Darkrai from getting its sleep off, with Lumberry being quite common in the lead slot in Gen 4 Ubers. Deoxys Speed is just faster than Darkrai, but then Darkrai runs Choice Scarf sometimes to outrun that. And Dark is a pretty good type in Ubers too, offensively especially, with so many Psychic types in Ubers like Mewtwo, Mew, the Laddie twins. The all-new Giratina and its origin form are both vulnerable to Dark type damage too. It feels like a pretty spammable type in Ubers, with not a lot that can come in on it. And Nasty Plot is a great way to set up on the sleeping opponent if you happen to get the sleep into the universe, if you happen to land that against something. So yeah, Darkrai has quite a meta-warping effect on Gen 4 Ubers. In Gen 4, Dark-type is in a bit of a weird place where it feels better and worse in many ways in Gen 4. Tyranitar in particular got significantly buffed in Gen 4 with the new Sandstream buff, granting Tyranitar more special defense because of its rock typing. And also the physical special split, allowing Tyranitar to now use Physical, Crunch, and Pursuit, which are incredibly powerful because Tyranitar has a way higher attack than special attack. So no need to invest in special attack like a bozo anymore to be able to hit ghosts. You already can. And ever since Latias dropped from Ubers to OU a couple of years ago, Tyranitar has had the important role of being a pretty fantastic check to that with its enhanced special defense and that hard-hitting pursuit. Dark Stab became way more prominent offensively on Tyranitar in every set it ran, including Dragon Dance sets, Choice Scarf sets, and this kind of miscellaneous Pursuit Trapper bulky set right here, which is probably the most common way to use Tyranitar in Gen 4. It's weird because, as I just said, Dark type got better and worse in this generation. Ghost type coverage became more common because Gengar now uses Shadow Ball, because Shadow Ball is a special attack. A lot of Pokemon use Shadow Ball as coverage, so Ghost resistance matters now. Dark resistance matters a bit more. But at the same time, fighting types are on the rise. Close combat and superpower now are more widely distributed. So hard-hitting fighting type coverage is pretty common, meaning Dark types are under fire in that respect defensively. Another bad thing that happened to Dark types is the introduction of U-Turn, which is a new bug type attack that is everywhere, not only on bug types, but on various Pokemon. So that kind of sucks. You can get caught in the crossfire of just anything clicking U-Turn pretty commonly as a Dark type, so that's a bit rough. That might be why not many Dark types are OU in Gen 4. Feels a little bit hard to be a Dark type, actually, in this generation. And if you're going to run a Dark type, why not just run Tyranitar? It creates the sand. It has the special bulk. It has all this coverage. It just does so much in one slot. It even has access to Stealth Rock, which you always want in Gen 4, and that just ticks a box that you need to tick, as does Pursuit. So yeah, a bit harder to justify using other dark types. One that does sometimes see some use is Weavile, although Weavile has a lot of defensive problems, as you can imagine. This is a dark ice type. Ice is never good defensively, with its myriad weaknesses. Dare I name them all? Rock, steel, fire, fighting. I mean, life is tough for ice types, and the dark type creates a ×4 fighting weakness, which is rough. But the dark type is probably a defensive benefit overall for ice type, mostly just because it adds ghost resistance and psychic immunity. Being ×4 weak to fighting versus ×2 weak, not that impactful on a Pokemon with such low defense anyway. Most fighting type attacks would just destroy you, even if you are ×2 weak, so dark provides more pros than cons for Weavile. It's one of the only things that allows it to actually hit the field in any context, but yeah, Weavile's pretty good. It's a really fast and hard-hitting wall breaker that can benefit from pivot support. It is weak to Stealth Rock. It struggles to hit the field, and it's very frail. It's vulnerable to Sand Chip. It has many issues, but it's alright. Weavile would feel way better in later generations with certain mechanical changes that we'll get to. Interestingly, Umbreon is OU by technicality in Gen 4, meaning back when Gen 4 was the current generation, people were using Umbreon enough for it to be OU by usage, which is interesting. I think the main reason for this is probably because Baton Pass was legal back then, and Umbreon is a pretty good Baton Pass chain enabler type Pokemon. You can go here from someone passing speed and then taunt the enemy or something, denying them from using Roar to get rid of all your boosts, and then Baton Pass to something else, maybe use Curse to boost up, and then go to something else after that. This could probably be good, but of course this is now an illegal strategy in Gen 4, so something from a bygone era. And I suppose Honchkrow deserves a shout out. It has a UUBL, does have a set on Smogon, and has some stuff. I mean, 100 HP is some decent natural bulk. 125 attack. That's nothing to sneeze at, to be honest. And good mixed attacking stats, actually. With access to Heat Wave, which is pretty good. It's like Scizor and other steel types like Skarmory. So with a Life Orb mixed attacking set. Brave Bird is pretty rare physical fighting type stab that's hard hitting. Sucker Punch for some priority. Superpower's good coverage. Not terrible. The main thing that I would say sucks about this is just rock weakness along with poor defensive stats. Insomnia is pretty nice on this too. Breloom is really popular in Gen 4, a Spore user. So you can come in and directly threaten that with Brave Bird or even Heat Wave if you want to not take recoil. So, sounds okay. Wouldn't be surprised to see this prop up in a tournament here and there. Does actually do some stuff that other Pokemon don't. Just sucks to be rock weak in this generation. That's the big thing. In Gen 5, once again Tyranitar is on the top of the Dark type food chain. What else is new? I feel a bit stupid saying how good Dark type was in the intro, and there's pretty much just Tyranitar every generation, looks like. What's up with this, Jim? I really do think this just speaks to how dominant Tyranitar was in Gen 3, 4, and 5 than anything bad about Dark type in particular. You look at Dark type in a vacuum, it's very strong. Good immunities, solid neutral typing against most of the meta, but yeah, Tyranitar just seriously steals the thunder from all other dark types in many ways. And in Gen 5, it feels even more important and central than it has in quite a while, with weather being such a common and prominent strategy. Being able to erase rain from the field is imperative, and sandstorm damage actually punishes rain significantly with all the Pokemon that rely on chip healing. I think part of the reason sand teams are so good and so popular in Gen 5 is just because you get to use Tyranitar. And Tyranitar is so good. I mean, the Pursuit helps so much against prominent threats like Latios, Alakazam, Reuniclus. Fire Blast is really useful coverage to hit Ferrothorn. You can run Stealth Rocks on this. Thunder Wave is useful utility. Like, Tyranitar is just this bowl of useful stuff that you're going to get something out of in every game. And it resets Rain, which is huge. Rain teams are built around all the rain synergy, whether it just be enhancing water type damage to break through enemy teams, or having that perfectly accurate thunder, or abilities like Rain Dish or Hydration. Whatever it may be, having Rain Up is their game plan, and Tyranitar just shuts that down a lot of the time. It feels like such an improvement to your consistency to run a Tyranitar. Hydreigon is also ranked OU. Even though I love this Pokemon, I don't know if it deserves OU. It's not that commonly seen, but it's pretty good. It's kind of like an alternative Latios. But the biggest difference it has with Latios is that it's a dark type, which is big. Hydreigon is not threatened by enemy pursuit from Tyranitar, and so dark resistance on dark type feels more relevant in this generation where Tyranitar pursuit is everywhere. Hydreigon also matches up kind of nicely into Psychic types. You can come in on Reuniclus Psychic. They might have Focus Blast, but they're scared to ever click Psychic because you can pivot in and threaten a big stab at Dark Pulse, which is a really nice move to click and threaten a lot at the same time. And Hydreigon has really interesting coverage. It's got Earth Power, Focus Blast, which Latios does not have options like this. So it's nice to be a dragon type attacker with, Dark Stab and all this interesting coverage. And you have U-Turn too, which is really good. You even have Nasty Plot. Oh, sorry, you don't have Nasty Plot in Gen 5. That would be a later addition. I've seen this guy in some tournaments recently. It's a cool Pokemon. I really enjoy Hydreigon's design. I love a Dark Dragon. That's such a cool type combo. And love all its tools. Love how hard hitting it is, especially. 125 special attack is lovely. And I want to give a shout out to Drapion here, because I saw this in SPL, which if you don't know is the highest level team tournament for Smogon, where every generation is played. And in a Gen 5 OU game, someone brought a Drapion. And I don't know why exactly they brought Drapion, and I can't remember who it was, forgive me. But I think it's because Drapion is Poison Dark, which is a good typing that matches up well into Reuniclus. Reuniclus has the coverage of Psychic, Fighting, Ghost with Psyshock, Focus Blast, and Shadow Ball. And Drapion is neutral to Fighting because of the Poison typing, immune to Psychic because of the Dark typing, and resists Ghost also because of the Dark typing. So Drapion is kind of this great Reuniclus switch in with the benefit of also getting rid of Poison spikes from the enemy by just switching in. That's something Poison types can do. And it has Toxic Spikes itself, which is useful. I don't know what it was running, but I imagine something like this could be okay. Maybe you do run like coverage on it. Fire Fang. It's not very good in terms of stats. It's got pretty solid defense. But I think that typing is what it was used for probably. Wouldn't be too bad into Alakazam either, would it? They have all the same coverage. They probably hit a bit harder. I guess you suck on the special defense side of things. But that was interesting. I gotta figure out who that was and ask them why they used Drapion, because that was one of the coolest novel Pokemon choices I've seen in a high-level tournament recently. That really stuck out. I was just searching through replays and saw a Drapion. I've been thinking about that, and I think that's why. It matches up well into the Psychics because of the neutrality to Fighting, which Tyranitar is obviously really weak to Fighting. It runs Choppleberry to patch that up, but, that's not foolproof, is it? You can get hit by 2 moves or whatever. Fighting types can still just hit you really hard, even through Choppleberry. So that's interesting, isn't it? The Drapion usage in Gen 5. Gen 6 is where Dark type really went to the moon, and you can see this clearly with the Ubers list here. Look at this. 4 new Dark type Ubers. Not all of which are even legendaries. I mean, that's crazy. Yveltal was the first ever Dark type box legendary, and this is an outstanding Pokemon with, of course, legendary level stats across the board. The ability Dark Aura, which, what do you know, it buffs Dark type attacks. And the newly buffed Knockoff being an option on this, which is really the whole reason Dark type became such a powerful type now. Knockoff was buffed from having 20 power back in the day to now having 65 power, and the effect of dealing 1.5 times more damage if your foe is holding an item. Putting this incredibly high power move and the utility of item removal all in one is just incredible. And Knockoff to this day is one of the strongest moves in the entire game. Not only did they receive perhaps the best new attacking tool that anything received in Gen 6, but also they got a bit of a buff in the type chart. Steel no longer resists Dark anymore. So Pokemon like Jirachi that used to be neutral to Dark are now weak to Dark. That's huge. Makes the type more spammable. Steel types are extremely common and used to be really good against Dark types. Not anymore though. It's interesting because in Gen 6, Dark types also got a new adversary in the form of Fairy types. Fairy resists Dark and is also super effective against Dark, but Dark still feels insanely strong this generation. Yeah, Yveltal is really solid in every Ubers format it's in. It has a really wide move pool, a lot of options. Can be mixed attacker with physical and special attack being equal. It has pivoting, item removal, Sucker Punch for priority, has Oblivion Wing, a really good signature flying type attack that heals you for like 75% of the damage dealt, which is crazy. There's also a damn starter Pokemon in Ubers this generation, what the heck? The all new water type starter Pokemon Greninja was banned in its debut game. Greninja has the ability Protean, which allows it to change type every single time it uses a move. So, use Ice Beam, you turn into Ice type. You use a Hydro Pump, you become Water type, etc. This means you have same type attack bonus on any coverage option you choose. So you can run like Gunk Shot and you become a Poison type. Even if you use Spikes, you actually become a Ground type. So, this has a lot of application. Not only just for the damage of stab that you get from it, but some defensive application. Maybe use Spikes and then There's an incoming electric move, you can dodge it. Really one of the best abilities ever. Water Dark is actually a pretty nice defensive typing, all things considered, for such a fast, offensively oriented Pokemon with not very good defenses. The fact that your Dark type gives you some entry points, you obviously have Psychic immunity and some resistances that are worthy, so yeah, better than nothing defensively. Imagine being an Ice Fire type or something, that would suck. Water Dark, on the other hand, pretty nice. It's interesting that you often choose to use Dark Pulse, even though you could really use whatever coverage you want. I mean, you become any type that you click, so it's not as if you're beholden to using Dark Stab because you're a Dark type. You can use whatever you want. Dark is just a great offensive type in this generation. Even though Greninja is Ubers in Gen 6, I don't think it's used very often in Ubers. It's kind of just relegated to the ban list because it was too overwhelming for OU. One of those Pokemon in the limbo state between Ubers and OU. Hoopa Unbound is another Pokemon. I remember when this came out, I thought this was like a fake joke or something. It's a bit ridiculous, isn't it? It looks like a Yu-Gi-Oh creature. It has like 8 hands. It's ginormous. It's called Hoopa Unbound. Sounds like somebody made that up for a comedy routine. I don't know. But it exists, to my dismay. This exists, and it is very real. And when you look at this, it's pretty insane. 160 attack, 170 special attack. Good bulk too. 130 special defense. Kind of an absurd Pokemon. So unsurprisingly, it's Ubers in Gen 6, but later this guy would actually feel pretty bad. I mean, Psychic Dark is not great. You don't like to stack a weakness to Bug because of how common U-turn is. So that's just the biggest reason that this typing is not super fantastic, because ×4 weakness to Bug really causes some problems. But as a breaker, this guy's pretty insane. It's got this move Hyperspace Fury, which has 100 power and lowers defense by 1, and also bypasses Protect. I mean, this is nuts, for sure. Has coverage such as Gunk Shot to hit Fairy types, which is nice. Fire Punch to hit Steel types. Drain Punch for, I suppose, enemy Dark types that resist your Dark Stab. You go Zen Headbutt if you want Psychic Stab. You can, of course, run mixed options too with its high special attack. It has some good special attacks in its move pool too. Dark Pulse if you like a special attacking Dark type option. Focus Blast. Grass Knot. What a Pokemon. What a ridiculous Pokemon. And Mega Sableye, a rare instance of a defensive Pokemon that got banned to Ubers. That rarely happens. But this guy was crazy. I spoke about this guy in my Ghost Types video, but I think I neglected to mention that this is one of my least favorite Pokemon of all time. I really dislike this Pokemon. They gave it too many things. I remember Sableye back in Gen 3, how it had that niche defensive value because of its Dark Ghost typing and powerful utility options like Recover and Knockoff being really strong, actually, making up for its horrendous stats. So it had really cool defensive and utility advantages, but horrible shortcomings in other areas. Well, what if you got rid of all those shortcomings and instead gave it outstanding defensive stats? And also the ability Magic Bounce, which is maybe the best ability in the game, bouncing back various advantageous effects, effectively granting a status immunity, even a hazard immunity. They can't click Stealth Rock safely if you got a Mega Sableye up. So they can't really touch the guy. It is insanely bulky. It is the best typing ever. Fairy at least can hit it now. Used to have no weaknesses. Now Fairy can hit it, but I mean, just have a teammate that resists Fairy. There you go. And Dark offers such defensive value alongside Ghost with its Psychic immunity and the neutrality to Dark and Ghost that you provide. I mean, it's unbelievable. And you have Foul Play, which is even stab boosted and hits sweepers. You got Recovery. You have status. You didn't have Will-O-Wisp before. They gave it Will-O-Wisp. That's fun. As Knockoff too. Why not? You can remove items too. You can do it all. You can do everything you want. And Dark types are unsurprisingly feeling a lot better in OU as well. Bishop is finally ranked in OU for the first time in its career. Feels like a great Pokemon in Gen 6 actually. One of my favorite things about Gen 6 OU is that Bishop is good. I like it because Bishop is at the crossroads of multiple mechanical changes that happen to benefit Bishop. Dark types got better offensively because the knockoff buff and the nerf to Steel type. So that's something. Steel types got better offensively because Fairy type now exists and Steel hits Fairy super effectively. And Defiant got better because Defiant raises your attack by 2 if you get your stats lowered. And Defog is now a move in the game that removes hazards, but it also drops evasiveness by 1. So if you switch in on Defog, you get this attack raise. So Bishop has the 3-pronged attack of indirect buffs that have benefited it, and I just really like the Pokemon. I think it's a fun and well-designed breaker that is strong in terms of its base attack. but it's targetable. It's times 4 weak to fighting. It isn't the best defensively, and it's nice to have a dark type that is neutral to fairy because of a complementary steel type in a world where Clefable is so powerful. That's really good. And the dark steel combo is just complementary. Weavile is now OU, and I gotta say, putting a choice band on this and just clicking knockoff feels a lot better now, because there's less that resists you. Knockoff is always doing something, because it removes an item as well, and it just hits really hard. It feels great. Weavile feels significantly better as this kind of frail, but fast, and absurdly powerful breaker. Tyranitar is of course still good, as you would expect. Still using Pursuit to trap stuff. Sand is not permanent anymore, which was a nerf to Tyranitar, but that's alright. Tyranitar also got a new Mega form, which gave it some more value. Has way higher stats with its Mega form, making it a better fit for the Dragon Dance set. But interestingly, Tyranitar is one of those Pokemon where the Mega form is not strictly better, because it requires that you run the Tyranitarite item. Waste of an item slot. Tyranitar likes to run stuff like Choice Scarf and Choppleberry and even Assault Vest or stuff like that. Mega Gyarados exists. It's UUBL in this generation. Suppose it's not a great fit. But it's one of the more interesting Megas because it changes from Water Flying in the base form to Water Dark in the Mega form, which has some defensive merit. You can Mega Evolve right before a Psychic type is about to hit you. Get immunity. That can set up for Dragon Dance. I always find it interesting when there are Mega forms when you want to delay the Mega Evolution sometimes for certain reasons. Like maybe you want to maintain the flying typing for that benefit of ground immunity. Or maybe you want to keep Intimidate, which the base form has. And later on you want Mold Breaker or you want to become Dark type at the perfect moment. For a counter attack to gain neutral typing against an incoming Rock type move maybe or something like that. It adds a bit of depth to decision making. I like it. And Crawdaunt absolutely deserves a shout out. Another benefactor of the Dark type buff, with its Choice Band adaptability set, adaptability granting even further stab damage than usual. And with knockoff, this is just insanely spammable. There's fewer resistances to knockoff now. The move is just such high power, high value, removing items, dealing such damage. And what's nice about Crawdaunt is the fact that it also threatens Aqua Jet, so you can bring it in against, I don't know, a Charizard, and they obviously want to exit because they will die to Aqua Jet if they stay in, and then you just hit them with the knockoff, the mix-up. And just about anything neutral to dark is gonna get at least 2-hit KO'd by a Crawdaunt knockoff. It is insanely hard hitting. Crawdaunt has always been one of my favorite breakers to use because it's so frail defensively, and so slow too, so it doesn't feel broken at all. Like, for such a hard-hitting Pokemon, it has clear flaws, but if you can ever get it on the field safely, maybe a double switch predict or just a pivot in, it's probably getting a KO because of how hard it hits, or just forcing a potentially game-ending mix-up with the Aqua Jet knockoff mind game. So I really like the gameplay Crawdaunt creates. Overall, very fun to use. Quite one-dimensional though. You do Choice Band, maybe you use like Swords Dance Life Orb is another set you can use. But the one thing it does is cool and fun. In Gen 7, many of the former Ubers are now OU power level. I mean, the overall power level increased significantly in Gen 7, so it makes sense. Mega Sableye, no longer the defensive behemoth it once was, with so many powerful offensive threats, like the Ultra Beasts and the Tapus and a lot of things, now being added to the game, making Stoli strategies pretty bad in Gen 7. And also, Mega Sableye is vulnerable to all the Z moves, which just absolutely destroy something. That also just makes Stall kind of suck in Gen 7. But kind of crazy to see Hoopa Unbound in UUBL when it was Uber just last generation. Also suffering a little bit from the increased speed and power level of many offensive threats in this generation. This used to be pretty fast for how threatening and bulky it was, but now there's threats that are outdoing this, even. Good Pokemon though in Gen 7 OU, actually. Really strong breaker, unsurprisingly. Greninja got a new ability in Generation 7, Battle Bond, which, after KOing a Pokemon, you transform into Ash Greninja. And Ash Greninja right here has way higher stats, notably 153 special attack and way higher speed of 132 base. So a very rewarding ability that also buffs Water Shuriken. If Ash Greninja uses Water Shuriken, I believe it has a slightly higher power and always hits 3 times, making it really consistent and powerful Water type special attack with priority on it. kind of a stupid Pokemon, to be honest. It was really popular on rain teams, and that Dark Pulse is insanely spammable with the choice specs on. This was such a popular offensive threat, and it was very easy for you to get that Battle Bond proc, become Ash Greninja, and just start going in. Protean Greninja was used too, though, sometimes. It has useful application, like with a choice scarf set that can pivot with U-turn, provide valuable speed control and stuff like that. But Ash Greninja certainly stole the show in this department. Continuing to show how powerful Dark-type is offensively now. Almost feels like the new Dragon-type. Dragon-type was once known as being that spammable, ignorant, offensive type that you could just jam without a care in the world. Dark is starting to feel that way, where you can just click Choice Specs Dark Pulse on Ash Greninja and not worry too much about whatever comes in. There are things that wall you, like Magearna and Clefable, but they're scared of the Specs Hydro Pump. It's kind of this deadly combo, isn't it? Tyranitar we know is good, for many of the same reasons it was in Gen 6. It doesn't feel that different from Gen 6 to 7, to be honest. Mega Gyarados got an upgrade. It's now ranked OU. Definitely a good wall-breaking Pokemon. Mold Breaker has useful application. You can Earthquake against Rotom Wash, who I believe was not as common last generation, more of a prominent force here. That's nice. And you can ignore Unaware. Unaware is an ability that just simply ignores enemy boosts, but Mold Breaker bypasses it, so you can Dragon Dance and not worry about like a Quagsire or a Clefable trying to ignore the boosts. Substitute can be used to shield yourself from an incoming Quagsire Toxic or something like that, so pretty nice anti-stall Pokemon, Mega Gyarados, with Crunch being the stab of choice on this particular set. And shout out to Muck Alola. Talked about this guy in my Poison Types video. I'm a big fan of Muck Alola, my favorite regional variant, alternate evolution of a existing Pokemon, type Pokemon, whatever they call those. The Dark typing makes a huge difference. It cancels out your Psychic weakness, and you get Stab, Pursuit, and Knockoff. An incredible buff just from a simple type addition. A perfect example of how good Dark type is. You give Dark type to Muck, all of a sudden Muck is pretty good. It's UU ranked, but has OU value with an Assault Vest set like this. It's actually a pretty damn reliable Pursuit Trapper and Fairy type switch in, because Poison cancels out your weaknesses to Fairy and Fighting from Dark typing, which is wonderful. It's a tremendous type combination. This is kind of a similar idea to that Drapion that we saw back in Gen 5, but this feels much better. I mean, you have new Knockoff, which is fantastic, better stats to be honest, and Assault Vest is a fantastic tool for this set too, enhancing your special bulk, allowing you to really hold your own against stuff like Tapu Lele, who is not actually going to do that much with a Stab Moonblast anymore because of your Assault Vest. In Gen 8, we have another Dark type, Urshifu, a Dark Fighting type. This Pokemon is really, really good. Has a massive attack stat. It's really fast for how hard it hits. And the bulk is not bad either. I mean, geez, 100 base HP and defense for a Pokemon with these offensive stats is really solid. Dark Fighting is complementary. You cancel out your Psychic weakness thanks to the Dark typing. And Wicked Blow is just a crazy move. 80 base power, always crits. There's always critical hits. It effectively has 120 power. Multiplied by 1.5 and ignores defensive boosts because it always crits. Crits ignore defensive boosts. And the ability Unseen Fist is also crazy. You ignore protection with your contact moves, which of course includes Wicked Blow. And all these moves on this set are all contact moves, so you can't even stall this with Protect or withstand it much at all. It's a crazy Pokemon. This is a good example of what I said in the intro, where Dark feels like such a great type offensively and defensively. I mean, this Wicked Blow is so spammable and powerful, partially because it's a Dark type attack. It's just such a good neutral attacking type. Pretty nice with its super effective damage too against Ghosts and Psychics, which are common. And defensively, it gives you some great resistances. This can hit the field and actually switch in. It's immune to Psychic. It has serviceable stats. I mean, definitely a Pokemon that takes advantage of both the offense and defense offered by Dark type. Dark types did receive a little bit of a hit in Gen 8 though, and that was the removal of the move Pursuit from the game. For generations, this was their main claim to fame, was their access to Pursuit. That was the whole reason you use a Dark type in Gen 2 and 3. At least the main reason. But now that's gone. Knockoff is really the star of the show for Dark types, but this was a big hit for Tyranitar. Tyranitar's whole thing was being a Pursuit Trapper for as long as it's been alive. Now it can't even do that. But amazingly, Tyranitar held on to OU status in Gen 8 anyway. It wasn't always that way. Tyranitar dipped to UU for a time, but it came back up. It's still bulky. it's still got that dark typing, which offers valuable immunities. Stab Crunch hits really hard off its base attack. Heavy Slam is a good new coverage option for it to hit fairies. And it matches up well against Dragapult, which is important because of how dominant Dragapult is. Nice mix of offense and defense with Tyranitar, but it still feels significantly worse than it did just one generation ago where it had Pursuit. Bisharp is back in OU, and it makes a lot of sense. A lot more defog users with heavy-duty boots being introduced. There are a lot more bulky flying types with defog in Gen 8, so being able to punish defog with Defiant comes up more often. And Dark remains just such a good and spammable type. Knockoff is arguably more important in Gen 8 because you want to get rid of heavy-duty boots, which is such a common and prolific item. Also helps that Slowbro became really popular in Generation 8, which made Dark-type wall breakers like this a little bit better. You threaten Slowbro significantly, that's really valuable. Back in Gen 6 when Knockoff was first buffed, Weavile felt way better, felt good in OU. But in Gen 7 it had some trouble. That frailty, that rock weakness came up a lot. Hard to justify using a Weavile in Gen 7. But in Gen 8, look at this, heavy duty boots now exist. And this was huge for Weavile. The ability to ignore rocks was massive, and as I just said, Knockoff feels even more important in this generation, full of enemy boots. Weavile also got the new option of Triple Axle, a really nice, hard-hitting, multi-hit ice-type stab option for it. Galarian Moltres was a new face in Gen 8, alternate form for Moltres with a dark typing instead of a fire typing. It has the signature move Fiery Wrath, just a simple 90 power special attack with 20% flinch chance. Pretty powerful special sweeper though. You could use a set like this with agility and a weakness policy to gain some offensive boosts when you get hit by something super effective. And Dark Flying, kind of a nice stab combo. Berserk, the ability also synergizes with the concept of taking a super effective hit on purpose, because when you're half health or below, you get another special attack boost. I mean, this is even nice just with agility. You just click agility, hope they hit you, get that special attack boost from Berserk, maybe also weakness policy if you're lucky, and you're off to the races. You're clicking buttons from there. And Mandibuzz felt really good in Gen 8, to be honest. Has Overcoat for that sleep immunity, which comes up a lot, and with boots now it feels way better defensively. Not worried about rocks anymore. A reliable defogger. It's got reliable healing, some anti-sweeper technology with foul play, scaling based on the enemy's attack. You can punish Swords Dance users. Not the best defensive stats in the world, but they're decent enough. In fact, they're reasonably solid. I really like Mandibuzz actually. Even has a U-turn for pivoting. That's a lot of utility in one. And the dark flying typing feels really good here. In a world where Dragapult is so common. You don't love taking a Draco Meteor, but dissuading Shadow Ball spam and honestly even Dark spam from enemies is nice. In Gen 9 we have two new Dark type Ubers, and I think if any Pokemon made Dark type feel like the new Dragon type, it was these two when they were OU. Because these guys could just click their Dark type attacks without a care in the world. Whether you resist or not, you're getting destroyed. This is partially because of the new Terra mechanic. One of the ways you can use Terra is to terrestrialize into a type that you already have, because it will grant you even further stab damage, a bit like adaptability. So that's usually what Chien-Pao would do, just Terra Dark and spam Crunch with a choice band on. At least you're weak to ice, meaning you're vulnerable to rocks, weak to stuff like Bullet Punch and Mach Punch, but when you terrestrialize, you get rid of your ice weakness too, which is nice defensively, and enhance the damage of Crunch. It's just insanely spammable. We can be thankful that this guy does not learn Knockoff, because that would be crazy. But yeah, insanely fast Pokemon, not even that bad defensively considering how hard hitting it is. And 120 base attack doesn't look that good, but you got the ability Sword of Ruin, which lowers the enemy's defense stat even further, so it has a higher attack stat than what it seems on the surface. Chien-Pao was crazy. And Chi-Yu was even crazier. Has a similar ability, Beads of Ruin, that lowers the enemy's special defense, a higher special attack stat than Chien-Pao has attack. It's way slower with only base 100 speed, but base 120 special defense is so bulky for such a hard-hitting Pokemon. It's kind of crazy. So Chi-Yu is one of the most ignorant Pokemon ever created. It is so absurdly strong, and with Terra Dark and Dark Pulse, you could tear through anything. It was unbelievable. This could break through Blissey,
The formerly indestructible special wall could get broken through by a Chi-Yu with Terror, Beads of Ruin, this special attack stat, everything adding up. This little fish was causing serious problems, truly. And now in Gen 9, Dark type is really starting to feel elite, at the absolute top of the type food chain. Look at all these OU ranked Dark types. The best Pokemon in the game, King Gambit, is a Dark type. And we've got 2 banned Dark types too to speak of, so Dark is just crazy in Gen 9. Something I forgot to mention back in the Gen 7 section actually, forgive me, a bit of a retroactive Dark type advantage, is the fact that they are immune to Prankster effects since Gen 7. Prankster is an ability that grants priority to all non-attacking moves, but if you're a Dark type, you are just immune to any Prankster buffed move. So if a Whimsicott uses Encore, which has the Prankster boost, on a Dark type, it will just have no effect, for example. I guess I have to talk about King Gambit again, don't I? Well, the thing about King Gambit is that it has a very high attack stat and the ability Supreme Overlord, granting further power on all of your moves for each fainted ally. Because of this ability, King Gambit is one of the greatest comeback Pokemon we have ever seen. In 6v6 singles, you can have up to 5 allies fainted, so you get a 50% damage boost on King Gambit, turning it into such a scary Pokemon. And this can't be ignored by Unaware. It's just a flat boost to your power. So you're going to even hit Pokemon like Dondozo really hard. King Gambit is a bit infamous for being able to solo teams on its own. You've got 5 fainted allies and 1 King Gambit. That King Gambit has a solid chance of winning. You got Sucker Punch to hit things with priority, Kowtow Cleave for the stab. We can once again be very thankful that this does not have knockoff. They cut back the distribution of knockoff in this generation, so not absolutely every Dark type gets it, which I think is good. Imagine this with knockoff. I mean, that would be crazy. Yeah, King Gambit, I mean, this is a common set with just Terra Dark, a bit of a Chien Pao vibe. Why not just do even more damage with my Dark type attacks and defeat everything? I even get more damage for my fainted allies, and a Black Glasses on top of it, Dark type damage on top of more Dark type damage. Why not stack it all to the moon? But you can do other things. You can go like Terra Fairy for some defensive value, is a common way to go, and maybe a Lumberry to block an incoming Will-O-Wisp. For that Swords Dance opportunity, you can just go Leftovers or Heavy Duty Boots for a more bulky oriented item. Terra Flying is another common way to go because you defensively become immune to Earthquake, which would otherwise threaten you, and you resist Fighting, which would otherwise threaten you. Great way to get a free turn to Swords Dance up. Yeah, King Gambit is an interesting Pokemon because, I mean, I think it's kind of broken. It's insanely bulky. It's got priority make up for its low speed. It just hits absurdly hard. It scales like crazy. It can come back and turn games into 50-50 mind games a lot. But the metagame's starting to adapt to it. There's been a rise in Encore usage, which punishes King Gambit, denying it from using Swords Dance or Sucker Punch too freely. There's been like substitute sets to punish King Gambit. Pokemon that specifically check King Gambit being introduced into the metagame like Zamazenta, who is a fighting type, which destroys King Gambit, and it even has a defense boost on it, along with a high defense stat. So that helped. It's broken, but I guess we're just accepting it in the tier, and it's kind of keeping things in check because the Sucker Punch, the priority dark move of Sucker Punch, does allow you to be more consistent against a lot of the fast offensive threats that exist in Gen 9. It helps against Dragapult and Goldengo. I suppose I have mixed feelings about the guy. There was a time when I wanted him banned. Now I don't know. We've adapted to him. He's just a part of our lives, and we have to accept his existence. I think one thing I don't like about this guy is that he's just a Bisharp, but stronger. And only last generation, Bisharp was an OU level Pokemon. Like, Bisharp was just OU. So, Bisharp, but stronger and less interesting. But the Supreme Overlord is an ability that's just like, what if I dealt more damage? And that's the whole thesis statement of King Gambit. I liked Bisharp. Bisharp was fun, but yeah, whatever. I suppose Defog rarely exists anymore, so Defiant is not that useful. And Goldengo stole the show as the anti-hazard guy, so we're in a whole different world in Gen 9, aren't we? Meowscarada is an old new Gen 9 starter Pokemon that is a grass type, with Protean on it. But Protean's been nerfed now. Protean no longer changes your type every single time you use a move. It only works once per switch in. So you switch Masquerada in and use Triple Axle, you will become Ice type. But then if you use Knockoff, you're still Ice type. You don't change to Dark as well. Probably they nerfed this to put more emphasis on the Terra mechanic, which is the new way to change types that they want you to use. So Protean would feel a bit unfair maybe, which it kind of was. It was broken back in the day. Yeah, Masquerada is really, really strong. I mean, even considering the nerf, Protean is a useful ability to get that stab boost on something once. The signature move Flower Trick is cool, a grass type attack that always crits, similar to Wicked Blow on Urshifu. And Knockoff with Stab on it is really good. This is a more scarce option now, as we said before. Like King Gambit doesn't get it, Qian Pao doesn't get it. Not every dark type gets Knockoff now, so a dark type with Knockoff is pretty noteworthy. Interestingly, Meowscarada doesn't always use, Protean. Sometimes it uses Overgrow with like a lead set like this, Focus Sash, and Meowscarada can also set Spikes. And this is an instance where you do want Knockoff for its stab damage because you don't have Protean. You don't have the benefit of changing type whenever. So this kind of set, you like having the stab knockoff. Because Protean can be kind of clunky now. It's a bit annoying when you, for example, triple Axle and then Knockoff no longer has stab, so it doesn't hit that hard. So sometimes these Protean Pokemon don't want to run Protean so they can keep their normal stab types. Roaring Moon has been a popular new dark type in the game since the beginning, since it first came out. It was definitely really, really strong early on and really popular. Didn't have knockoff initially, but it was really good anyway with the Dragon Dance and Acrobatics combo, which benefits from Booster Energy, a new item that gets consumed and activates Photosynthesis once, which buffs Acrobatics because you no longer have a held item, doubling this move's power, and that synergizes with Terra Flying, not only buffing Acrobatics damage, but also defensively helping you out, granting you fighting resistance and ground immunity to set up Dragon Dance. So a perfect showcase of all these new Gen 9 mechanics here, all in one, which made it really popular early on. It showcases the offensive and defensive advantages of Terra at the same time, and this new Booster Energy concept. But Roaring Moon has had a damn character arc. It fell to UU for one time. I don't know what was up with that. I guess everything was broken back then. It's all a blur. I think it was Ubers for a bit, and then it got demoted back to OU again. It's hard to keep track with these damn Gen 9 tiering decisions, I'll be honest. I might even be thinking of Baxcalibur or somebody else, or Gliscor was Uber. Was that a dream? I can't remember. But you know, Roaring Moon has had a bit of an ups and downs, a bit of an elevator roller coaster ride in Gen 9 so far. But ever since he got Knockoff, he felt way better. Had to use Crunch before, not the best option. One of the strongest offensive game-ending win conditions in Gen 9 OU right now. It's also pretty good defensively. Dragon Dark, a lot of useful resistances there. It's got entry point potential. It's got good health and like 101 special defense. Nothing to sneeze at all for such an offensively threatening Pokemon. Hisuian Samurott was the most significant new addition from the Pokemon Legends Arceus world. Hisuian Samurott has an extra dark typing on top of the water typing that the original Samurott had, and the new ability Sharpness, buffing slicing moves by 1.5 times damage. On top of this fantastic new ability, guess what else Samurott Hisui has? One of the strongest dark type attacks we have ever seen. Ceaseless Edge, which is a physical attack that also sets a layer of spikes on the field as you attack. Unbelievable, conceptually. And this also gets buffed by Sharpness, so it's even stronger than it looks. This alone is what makes Samurott Hisui such a force to be reckoned with. You can hit really hard with the best attacking type in the game. You got that great offensive and defensive harmony. And yeah, you can deal damage and set spikes on the field at the same time. That's unbelievable. Setting spikes on the field was already worth doing without attacking and doing damage at the same time. This can't be stopped by taunt like spikes can, and I really can't stress enough how powerful of a concept this is. And you also get Knockoff, which, as we've established, is more scarce now, so that's wonderful. And Razor Shell gets buffed by Sharpness, which hits really hard. You have the same stats as Samurott, which aren't great, but the incredible benefit of being a dark type now and having all these great new tools is tremendous. Ting Lu is an all-new defensively oriented dark type. Haven't seen one of those in a while. And it's one of the strongest we have ever seen in the whole franchise, I would say. I mean, look at these defensive stats. 155 health is crazy. Massive defense stat. And this ability, Vessel of Ruin, lowers the enemy's special attack stat. So that effectively enhances your bulk even further. This thing can feel indestructible sometimes. Really strong. And dark type proving how good it is defensively too. This being a pretty nice switch in to things like Goldengo and Dragapult, assuming the Dragapult is Specs and not Will-O-Wisp, because you don't want to really get burned. Ting Lu's Prankster immunity also came in handy in the early metagame when Grimmsnarl was everywhere. Grimmsnarl has Prankster and options like Parting Shot to pivot out with priority, but Ting Lu would block it because of the Prankster, so great way to get ahead of that. The thing about Ting Lu though is it has a pretty limited move pool. Despite its amazing stats and the sheer bulk of it, pretty much exists just to make hazards. It doesn't have a reliable healing like Recover, doesn't have any status moves like Toxic, doesn't have knockoff, or any real way to make progress other than making hazards. That's good enough though, for it to be OU. I mean, making hazards is strong, it progresses your game plan, it forces damage on the enemy. You got Earthquake at least, that's something to click. Whirlwind has come in handy throughout this metagame, against things like Espathra that was running rampant, now banned, but for a time that was broken. And various offensive sweepers, being able to force them out is nice. Also uses this, Ruination, like a Super Fang effect that just deals half of the target's current health. Just a way for it to do something. If it doesn't want to commit to hazards, it can at least just deal a significant amount of chip damage to something incoming. A very limited Pokemon, a very one-dimensional Pokemon, but it has an important job, and it does it well. Rounds you out defensively. It's the hazard setter of the team, and some teams love stacking hazards with Goldengo, so Ting-Lu fits there. And Weavile is back in OU. This was not always the case. Earlier on it didn't get knockoff, and I don't think it got triple axle either. Received both of these powerful new options in DLC, and immediately saw a bit of a return to form. Weavile was also not a fan of the fact that Qian Pao was so prominent in OU for a time. Qian Pao eventually got banned though, so Weavile rising up to fill the role of the Dark Ice type that is fast and hits hard. And of course we're closing this video out on the Dark type with the peak of Pokemon design, and I say that from an objective standpoint, because Iron Jugulus is known worldwide as the masterpiece of this wonderful franchise. I don't think there ever will be a Pokemon as beautiful and perfectly crafted in every way as Iron Jugulus is. They thought to themselves, what if Hydreigon was a robot? Which by itself is a brilliant idea, but then there's the issue of what to call such a Pokemon. I mean, they've established the naming convention of Iron, and then one of the Pokemon's traits, so like Hariyama, that's Iron Hands in its robot form, because of course Hariyama has hands. And I'm sure that all creatives can relate, where you hit sort of a roadblock, and you start Iron. There's a good start. There's the first part done. But then what's next? What traits does Hydreigon have? Well, it's a dragon, but now it's a robot, so not really. It has a neck. Well, it has 3 necks to be exact. So that's the most prominent feature of it, is that it has multiple necks. But Iron Neck? I mean, you can't call it that. That's stupid. I don't think anybody would be fond of Iron Throat. I mean, that sounds a little bit disgusting. And then, like many scholars do, they turn to ancient history. The Greeks and the Romans. The ancient language of Latin, which is the predecessor to the English language. And we can see on the Dict Zone website that the word jugulus actually translates to collarbone, throat, or neck in English, which is a perfect descriptor of something that Iron Jugulus has on its body, which is what we're going for here. So it's brilliant. But you can't just go jugulus in the Latin spelling like so, because that would be too obvious and too, quite frankly, pedestrian. So a little bit of a touch, a creative touch from Game Freak. Replace the U with an I, and it's perfect. It's a perfect Pokemon. And there you have it, folks. Dark types throughout the generations. It's a type that started strong back in Gen 2. There weren't that many viable Dark types in OU for a couple generations. It was mostly just Tyranitar stealing the show for a bit there as the premier pursuit user. Not to the fault of the Dark type. I feel like there weren't that many Dark types back then, and maybe they didn't play to the Dark type's strengths, and also Tyranitar was just absurdly strong, taking spotlight away from other Dark types at the time. With the introduction of Knockoff, the nerfing of Steel type to now be vulnerable to Dark, and even that little prankster buff, that helped a little bit. Dark type slowly but surely became an offensive behemoth, with a great mix of a spammable neutral attacking type that hits a lot of stuff, that incredible move of Knockoff, and also good defensive advantages, valuable immunities and resistances that you want. Dark has evolved to be an elite type, one of the best types you can have in this game. What do you think of the Dark type, and who is your favorite Dark type in the series? I know it's a boring answer, but I have to go with Tyranitar. I'm a big fan of the Pokemon. I really enjoy a dominant and central Pokemon that has a lot of versatility, targetable flaws, and shapes the metagame in a positive way, which I think Tyranitar did for many generations, on top of being enjoyable to use in-game. But what about you folks? There's so many great ones to choose from. And thank you for watching.